Good evening and welcome to our program, Jones and Company. I'm your host, Khristian Jones, and on this special edition of Jones and Company, we have joining us a very special guest, and I'll allow him to introduce himself, but we have joining us on our program, Dr. Peter Baofu. Dr. Baofu, welcome to Jones and Company.
Thank you for inviting me. Let me just introduce myself as you requested. I'm an American missionary. I have been to more than 153 different countries around the world to do my ethnographic research to understand humanity, because I have written more than 180 different books in all fields of knowledge and provide more than 150 different new theories and visions of the human future in relation to the mind, nature, society, and culture. A totalistic understanding of humanity, and my book tour in this sense is related to the massive project that I'm doing, because I want to provide some solution, realistic one, to global problems confronting the whole humanity, not just one country, one race, and one society.
Right, and you are described, Dr. Baofu, as a polymath, and many of us in our lives perhaps don't get the opportunity to meet or speak to a polymath, but you have collected credentials, education, knowledge across several different disciplines of the humanities and all sorts of other spheres of intellect. So in terms of what you're doing, the initiative that you're currently engaged in terms of building this higher level of humanity, this higher level of understanding of humanity, does one have to be a polymath to do that?
No, you do not need to be, but it's much better. Let me give you one example, one explanation. When I was younger, when I was still in school, I read a lot of different books and articles by different thinkers in human history. And one thing which I find out is that many of them commit something that I said to myself, I do not want to do, is that they tend to, they have a certain passion, certain vision, and they use that passion, their vision, as the vantage point to look into everything else. There are so many examples. You look into all those thinkers which have shaped human history. You talk about Jesus Christ, about Christian religion, and look at everything from the standpoint of the Christian perspective. You look into Karl Marx during the Cold War. It's communism, class struggle. That is the viewpoint, and he analyzed everything else from the standpoint of class struggle. You talk about Sigmund Freud. It is about psychoanalysis. Look at everything from the standpoint of psychoanalysis. You talk about Adam Smith in economics. You look into everything from the standpoint of competition. You look into biology, survival of the fittest, the Darwinian theory, everything from the standpoint of survival of the fittest. I came to understand that no, I disagree totally. I think that reality is so complex on Earth that you need to have more than just one science or one single vision to understand all of them. You need to have many of them. And I discovered that you need to have a totalistic understanding of humanity, and to be a polymath in many ways is a prerequisite to do something like that. Unfortunately, we are in the professional age of specialization. And if you're not a specialist, people look at you and say, oh, you're just a person who knows everything about nothing. I mean, this kind of dismissal, I think it's very unfortunate, but we need to do something like that. Now, I told you that I have provided more than 150 different visions and theories of the human future. I did not say one theory, I said 150. Why so many of them? Because many of them are from different angles of observation. My job is to show people, look, if you look from this angle of observation, you see this. But you ignore all of this. On the other hand, you go to this angle of observation, you see this, but then you ignore all of this. I want to show them that each of them can make some contribution, but they also tell you some other things. Some of the theories that I have is what I call the unified theories of everything. Not unified theory, but theories. I think I propose at least 3 of them. Those are the unified theories on the meta-theological level. to understand reality. So I did some combination of some of them can be comprehensive, some of them can be partial, but if you look into the total picture, you will be able to see reality for each of the perspectives, just like different pieces of the same pie.
Right.
You cut them out. This piece is for you, this piece is for you, but you can also have another picture of the total, the whole pie too, as another perspective. And then you have to go into different angle of the whole pie. That's exactly what I'm doing. So in a way, we are moving to that direction. And another theory of mine is called about post-humanity. And I predict that the human future will not last forever. The human race will become extinct, and they will be replaced by post-humans. And the post-human mindset will become more and more polymorphic. It go beyond that, because one of the major limitations of our time, in human time, of the human race, is that many of us cannot think beyond several perspectives, because our mind is still very, very primitive when you compare with those in the post-human age that I'm predicting. In a way, I'm doing a very pioneering work, because I do think that future post-humans, not humans, they will be able to surpass many of the things that I'm doing, but I'm predicting what they are going.
Right, and you know, we look at, they say art imitates life. So we look at the Terminator movies, and even most recently, we've heard such people as Pope Francis, we've heard different leaders of different countries, express concern about the growing and rapid rate of intelligence that is being developed in artificial intelligence. And when you talk about post-human, or you even posit the possibility, of a post-human reality, that is what I kind of think about. But in terms of those who assess and those who critique humanity, Professor Baofu, one of those being, I suppose, when we look at humanity, we all need to be unified behind those threats which are to humanity. And when we look at humanity today, in 2024, the 21st century, and the senses of global warming and all of these different things, what are the greatest threats that are posed to humanity at this point, or to the extinction?
Okay, two quick points very quickly. The first one is your question about what is the greatest threat. The second one is about, you talk about we need to be united. The two questions are related, the 2 points are related. Let me address them one by one. The first question was the greatest threat. Because I'm a polymath, I don't look at things again from the one perspective. If you have one perspective, you will say, from my perspective, that is the greatest threat. But because I look in all fields of knowledge, and I don't think that's one of them. There are many of them, and that's actually what I have been saying all along. If you look into the problem confronting humanity, it's not one problem. It's not even one biggest problem. There are many problems, and many of them are very serious. And we have to look at them from a perspective of combining all of them.
But take Professor,
Global warming, we just mentioned, is one of them. The war right now, for example, in Ukraine, in Gaza,
you compare, for example, the global increase in carbon emissions and greenhouse gases, and the threat of rising sea levels, which I just saw a graph or a pictograph this week that showed by 2050 much of the landmass in some of our islands dissipating. Now that is an issue for the human species that exists in small island developing states like ours and other coastal communities. But if you contrast that with, let's say, global terrorism, or let's say, like you mentioned, the war in Ukraine or the war in Israel, and the prospect of nuclear war, which has become even more foreseeable, right? Which one of those would be a greater, or have greater impact on?
I don't look into. Let me make it in a different way so that it can be clear. When people look into a problem like this, let's say they go into global warming, They will look into the problem of global warming from the standpoint of one perspective, like, okay, the sea level will be rising and that's going to flood all these small islands in the Caribbean, the Pacific Ocean, and all that. Oh, this dangerous, this is very, very problematic. On the other hand, people look into the problem, let's say the war in Gaza or Ukraine and all that. And they talk about, oh, look at the threat of the nuclear war and look at how dangerous it is. And therefore, that is the biggest threat facing humanity. You see that the problem about all of these perspectives is that each of them is looking at the elephant from one perspective. I'm not sure if you are familiar with the fable of the elephants in India. In Indian culture, nowadays also in many other cultures, they have a fable, there's a myth, there's a story about what is an elephant, just like what is the biggest threat. So someone who is blind will touch the elephant and say, yeah, so the point is from each perspective, the biggest threat, the biggest problem, the elephant is this. But I'm saying, no, the elephant is not any of this, the elephant is all of this. And we need to look into the problems from a totalistic viewpoint such that we can understand them and elaborate all of them and still all of them, global warming, the problem in Gaza, in Ukraine. For me, they are the biggest threats to humanity, not just one versus the other. Because when you say it's the biggest, then the other one are minor. No, maybe this one is minor in that perspective. You may die out even before you have the chance to see this biggest threat. So if the one, for example, we talk about the global warming is by 2050, is going to rise up and all, then maybe we may not be there by 2050. Maybe the nuclear war will wipe us all out in the next 10 years or 5 years. We may not even see it 2050. Understand me? I'm not saying that it's going to wipe us out in 10 years. I'm just.
You can't forget what about the inevitability of, let's say, a huge comet the size of the moon making impact with the.
You may talk about another impact of the asteroid, for example, it's going to wipe out. But I'm just saying that each of these problems need to be confronted. In fact, each of these problems in some ways are also related.
Right. And Professor, your point is taken when you talk about the fable with the elephant. And just to put a finer point on it, I think it goes, there are three blind men, all, rubbing up on the sides of an elephant, trying to say what an elephant is. And one grabs the side, one grabs the tail, one grabs the trunk. Yeah. And to each of them, that's an elephant.
Right? Absolutely. The elephant must be this, cannot be another one. And in fact, this is also dangerous in another way. I was interviewed like this many times before, and people asked me this question. And one of my previous interviews, in the same case, I told them that it's very dangerous because people have been killing each other. People have been fighting against each other because they think they have the absolute truth. In fact, what I'm telling you is that I'm quite aware of this problem. That's why in my methodology, I even warn against those who use my theory in the future and say, this theory is also the absolute truth. I tell you now, even my theory is not absolute truth because my theory is also grounded on some assumption, and I'm trying to use those assumptions in such a way that they are subject to change within the methodology. So that the methodology is much more robust, much more possible to change.
Right.
So let me give you another example. I propose a lot of theories and vision, 150 of them. Another one, 2 of them is I predicted too that capitalism will not last. It will be replaced by new.
That's in the Communist Manifesto.
No,
evidence of we see in from the Communist Manifesto.
No,
doesn't say definitely, but evidence of the fact that capitalism has come to some sort of end is the frequency we see of these.
No, fine, but I'm totally a different animal altogether when you talk about this. I'm not talking about communism. In fact, I'm totally against communism. In fact, I fled communism myself in my life, so I don't care about those systems. But what I'm trying to say is that when I talk about post-capitalism, that's my theory. My theory is not about capitalism at all. My theory is about post-capitalism, and what I'm trying to say is several things. Number one is that there will be a new economic system emerge. It will not be communism. It will be what I call post-capitalism. And secondly, post-capitalism will not be understood well in conjunction by itself. It must be understood in relation to other visions. I talk about another one that I just mentioned is even democracy will not survive. Democracy will be superseded by a new political system I call that post-democracy. So to understand post-capitalism, you also have to understand post-democracy. And you also have to understand what I call post-civilization. So my theory, as you can see now, is again, not one perspective again. You see the totality, many different things, and I provide a new vision of each of them. And another distinctiveness of my understanding of life about the prediction is that you cannot use one perspective again to understand anything, including the prediction about post-capitalism that cannot be understood well by itself. You also have to understand that in relation to other pieces of the pie.
Right. Professor.
That is very, very uncommunist and uncommon. I'm totally against it, by the way.
I'm interested to hear about this concept of the obsolescence of democracy and what comes after democracy. And living in the Bahamas, and of course our close proximity to the United States of America, that some considers the bastion of democracy. I don't know if that's the presumption anymore. But living in a democratic country and loving democracy is one thing. But it's always a temptation of us who live in democratic systems, don't you think, to try and ram democracy down the throat of those who perhaps live in countries where there is a different system. Take, for example, President Joe Biden says that President Xi Jinping is a dictator. Do you believe that President Xi Jinping is a dictator?
By the way, in another book that's called The Rise of Authoritarian Liberal Democracy, I challenge the conventional wisdom that, because that is a narrative now that we see, you talk about democracy versus autocracy. Democracy is good, autocracy is evil. We in the West are the good guy, the democratic liberal democracy. On the other side, Z and all those people, those are the dictator, the evil guy, and all the Iran, North Korea.
You believe President Xi is a dictator?
I don't believe in any of it, not even 1%. Okay.
What do you believe?
I don't believe in any of them. I do believe that the prediction that I talk about, that post-democracy will be emerging. In fact, it is emerging already, but slowly. It's not that it will happen in 24 hours. History changes, but it will not change in 24 hours. And also, when history changes, there are a lot of different things which are happening, and that's why I said, based on my methodology again, it will not be changed on the basis of the economic system, the political system itself, in conjunction again with many other factors, economic, environmental, political, diplomatic, military, and all that together. So to answer your question, will I think that it is true? No, not at all. It's propaganda. By the way, it's another reason that I have been engaging in a global tour. Now you understand why. If I care so much about what Biden or anyone else who says something like this, why do I care to come here? Why do I care to come to the Bahamas to listen to you? If I believe in this kind of narrative, by the way, it's not just the US, we go to many other countries, including the Bahamas. Each country, each culture has its own narrative. Just in case you think that's only because of Biden, no. Don't think that Biden is the only person who does that.
No,
Everyone else on
earth.
earth. No, I understand that.
What the leader of the West, the leader of the free world is.
So I'm going beyond that. I'm elaborating that. I'm saying that don't believe in any of these narratives, but try to go beyond that. Once you go beyond that, and you will see that many of the narratives that we have, for those people who want to change history, who want to improve history, we need to take step one, that you need to be aware that all this is propaganda.
Right.
But you go to China, they also demonize the US too. They also have their own narrative, that their narrative, their version, their system is superior. The US one is decaying, decadent, no good, and all that.
Right, but my question isn't predicated on any kind of belief. If it was, I'd start talking to you about Muslims in prison being fed pork and liquor and all of that sort of propaganda. But my question is just to understand in terms of how you think about these things, or how you think but as you mentioned, the propaganda involved in looking at these two competing beliefs or these two competing value systems?
Again, I don't call that two computing system because based on my research, I said in my books too, by the way, that's why we need to get out this either or thinking, black or white, black versus white, okay? But beside black and white, you have green, you have red, you have purple. You understand my analogy?
Shades of gray.
Yeah, it is the center of the narrative. I have been in more than 153 countries already, okay? By the end of my tour, I will be in all the countries on earth. And I have seen so many narratives. It's not one versus two. There are so many of them. The US is one of them, China is another one, India is another one, Brazil is another one, the Caribbean now is another one. Africa is another one. You keep on going. Even within Africa, you have so many different versions. You go to North Africa, they have another version. You go to South Africa, another version. You go to Eastern Africa, another version. So it's not just Biden versus C. Not at all. If you look into the world that I have, in fact, I have another book which is called Beyond the World of Titans and the Remaking of World Order, in which I predicted more than 20 years ago that we have a new international system coming up in such a way that there will be that's kind of new superpowers, especially the US, China and India, which would be the top superpowers. Now it's coming true now.
You predicted it 20 years ago.
More than 20 years ago.
Thucydides predicted it thousands of years ago.
Well, we're not talking about the same thing. What I have predicted is different from other people because I have different arguments to support that. Just because someone has a car doesn't mean that the car is the same as my car. My car may be Mercedes, your car can be Honda, your car can be electric EV. So just because someone mentioned a word doesn't mean that I have an uncle, doesn't mean that your uncle looks the same as my uncle. My uncle is different from your uncle. The same thing about car or prediction. If someone can say something, it doesn't mean that they're saying the same thing that I'm saying, or I'm saying the same thing that they're saying. Each of them has a different uniqueness. You understand that communism was not invented by Karl Marx, but communism was popular in the Cold War because he was the most influential guy. But it isn't the same logic. So in order to understand the future, you have to understand different vision, but don't just link things together superficial because you will miss a lot and understand which one will be more important in the future.
You and I might say that we'll run a race, so to speak, right? Just you and I, 100 meter dash. And either, you might be faster, I might be slower. We might run in two different uniforms, two different outfits. We might, even if it's a marathon, have to take, perhaps different routes in terms of how to get it, but we'll get there, right? And you look at certain things, certain concepts, right? And the universality of that, right? In terms of the fact that, it is not really disputed, right? That China has overtaken the United States in terms of their impact on the global stage.
Wait until you talk to the conservatives in the US. They do not
But that's political, that's posturing. Right?
No, it's not that. You go to Australia, you go to Europe, you go to some other country. They reject many of the narrative. But see, my methodology is very different. I don't dismiss other people if they disagree with me. The reason is because, as I said at the beginning, we need to get away of that box. You understand that? One perspective is to understand everything else, and I allow competing perspectives. They are part of life also.
But the universality of truth, okay? There may be, we talk about the creation of the world, okay? In the Vedas, the Indians have a concept, right, of the creation of the world, so do Buddhists, so do Christians, and the list goes on and on. But we know that somehow, by some concept, there has to be, or there is, some sort of intervention. And some of these stories, some of them mirror each other and line up. My point is, Thucydides thousands of years ago, in terms of the concept of Thucydides trap, where you have a large established power, such as Athens, that is challenged by an upcoming power such as Sparta. and the inevitability that because of technology and advancement, one of them has to overtake the other.
Fine. Since you mentioned him, let's talk a bit about him then. I disagree with that trap that he was talking about. I don't think that the conflict between the U.S. and China is unavoidable. Quite on the contrary. And the reason is because it's not just about him now. There's another person, Western American. He's a well-known professor of political science at the University of Chicago. I think he's John Mearsheimer or something. He's also saying something like that, but in his different vision, realism. His notion is that the U.S. is the hegemon, but now there's a great power coming up, which is China. So if they come and dominate the world, they will repeat what the U.S. is doing. They become hegemonic too. They will start oppressing, colonizing, whatever, due to other people that the U.S. has been doing. And same according to him, since we are in the U.S., we should make sure that the U.S. will continue to be dominant so that the other guy will not come in, because if the other guy comes in, he will be as bad as we are. So it's no good for Americans to support them. I disagree with all of this because, number one, I don't believe in that trap. I think that the U.S. and China are very different in terms of values and belief, and that's why if China will ever become hegemonic, they will not be hegemonic in the way that the Europeans have been colonizing, brutalizing, massacring, and all that we've been seeing the last few hundred years, because the cultural values are very different. So that kind of trap, and also that kind of trap that he mentioned that the rising power will always challenge the old one and they will fight by war. I don't believe in any of this, because I do think that sometimes it happens, but it's up to the two powers how to resolve each other. And right now, China is trying to avoid that trap altogether. If you look into how China has been behaving, they are trying to avoid that trap altogether and say there's no need to have a fight. In fact, that's why they call it a win-win scenario.
There have been increasing tensions in the South China Sea. Traditionally, historically, in the last few years, tensions between India and China on the Tibet border. There have been, across, when we look at it through the United Nations, through the World Health Organization, there's been tensions between the United States and China that have been apparent. I'm not talking about acts of aggression and warfare. But even please, if you allow me, Professor, there was a news article here about, I would say, within the last year and a half, where you had a general in the United States of America and somebody who was in the Chinese embassy here in the Bahamas going back and forth in the press talking about who is trying to influence the Bahamas more. And you have, the Chinese has built an embassy and has donated, has at least assisted the Bahamas in granting or in building certain things like this beautiful stadium that we have here. And China argues that the United States has built one of the largest embassies in the region right here in the Bahamas as a way of imposing influence on the Bahamas. So is there not competition?
No, you're not understanding what I'm saying. I'm not talking about this.
That's what you're saying.
No. You are talking about war because the notion of the trap that you mentioned by that guy more than 2,000 years ago, he was talking about that why rising power will fight in war with the established power. That's unavoidable because both of them want to achieve hegemonic domination. I said, no, I do not believe in any of that trap. They are not unavoidable, they are avoidable. And in fact, I'm saying that if you look into human history, there are a lot of different powers. This is a very Western concept of international relations. Again, I want you to get away from. You are still repeating a lot of propaganda in Western education. This is Western educational propaganda. And you have to get away from it. So, yes, this is a Western concept about international relations. Look, you go to
Eastern
India.
philosophers perhaps will not look at the same thing, but
No, look. You go to India, you go to China, you go to East Asia, you go to, because I've been in so many countries, you go to Western mass media, they talk like this. You go to the East Asian countries, the Buddhist countries, they don't talk like this. Their mindset is very different. For them, their mindset is more about a win-win scenario.
What if I go to Taiwan?
No, okay. I will go into that. There's another one too. That's exactly why China did not invade Taiwan. Taiwan is a small island next to China. If China wants to invade Taiwan, Taiwan has no chance. But China did not want to invade China. They have all the power right now today. They do not want. Why? Because they are Chinese. The people in Taiwan also Chinese. If you interview people over there, they will say, why do we kill the other Chinese? They are also Chinese too. That's part of the history of Civil War.
People in Tibet, the Chinese as well.
Exactly, and that's why, look, people in Tibet, they are much better. They live much better now than they were 700 years ago. Look at all the construction. I was in those areas. I was also in the western part of China. If you go to many of them, people are quite happy with what they have. Look at all this kind of transformation, economic development. It's amazing how much they have achieved. And all this talk about the dependent oppression, I think you read too much Western propaganda. Go to China and look at them yourself. Go to Tibet. Go to those places yourself.
My question to you in terms of Thucydides' structure, right, is not to change your thinking or not to assert that one school of thought, be it the Western school of thought or any other one, is supreme or
I'm not talking about superiority.
Right.
I'm talking about the validity. I think you misunderstand me. I'm not saying that you should not believe those beliefs. Belief
No,
is the
I'm not
belief.
telling you I believe a belief. I'm advancing a belief that is over 2,000 years old and asking
In
your-
Western philosophy, my answer is already there. I say no. I disagree with that. I think it's very clear.
Yeah, but-
It's not because I'm an answer question.
Yeah, but I asked you a question not because I believe it.
No,
I
I-
asked you that Xi Jinping, if Xi Jinping is a dictator, not because I believe it.
I answered already.
That's the
The
question.
answer is no, but I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that you have to be careful about those theories. Those are Western conception of international relations. They're alternative theories and understand them. Try to appreciate the other side too. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you should abandon what you believe in. That's your belief. You can do whatever you do. But we have an intellectual conversation. The purpose of the conversation is to challenge each other. That's the whole point. You believe at the end of the conversation, believe whatever you believe. But remember, this is a debate going on. I challenge you. Don't like it, that's okay. But I'm just saying that there's other version of reality, other perspective. Try to understand. That's what you asked me at the beginning, a polymath. Understand me? One of the things that I have been doing is to say that try to get away from those boxes that they put you into. Many of those boxes, including this theory, is also one box that put you into, and think about international relations in that way. I'm saying that there are other boxes that you can go into, and by the way, if you go to the other box, be careful too. Don't trap yourself into that single box. To be a polymath, by the way, is to understand that this is a box, but there's also another box that you can understand, and then try to play with each other. At the end of the day, you don't allow yourself to go into any of the boxes to dominate you, but you can understand that, I can see that this is one box, but there's another one here which is just the opposite of this box. But I will use this one, but I will not allow them to dominate me. And therefore, at the end of the day, you will say, no, that's not unavoidability. The two of them will fight for a war, will fight for global domination. They will behave in a different way. That is the beauty of the polymathic methodology that I'm proposing to you. Not that you have to stop believing in them, or it's bad now, it's good. No, that it can be bad, fine. But I'm just saying, get away from that kind of rigidity and think that stands for the truth. And therefore, Professor, what do you think is the truth for 2,000 years already? He must be right. I say no. But I'm not saying that you must be like me also. I'm not saying that you must be go to China and live there and support him as a dictator. I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm saying that. What I'm trying to do, you understand me? We have to get away from this kind of
What I
traps.
think it is a rigidity in terms of currently the understanding of these issues, right? Because you will say you disagree, right?
But by the way,
I can't tell you that I'm completely or fully sold on.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm
But
saying
it
that.
is the concept.
I'm saying that this narrative is very popular in Western mass media. That's what I'm saying. you still do not understand me. It is one of the, sometimes I think that I'm very blessed that I have been able to go to so many countries now, 153 of them, and I can see very, very clearly. You go to many other countries, people simply do not talk like this, like the Western mass media have been teaching you. You, by the way, not you personally. In English, you can be anyone, so don't get offended. I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying that this kind of narrative is very popular. I know that because I'm from the West. I live that on a daily basis. I hear about this every day. And I tell you now, this is the Western propaganda. And if you go to many other countries, especially in the non-West, you go to, let's say, Africa, Asia, Latin America, for example, and you see that less and less people will talk like this. They will give you another perspective.
Professor Baofu, take this first break on our program, Jones and Company. We'll be right back. Got it. Our program, Jones and Company. Once again, I'm your host, Khristian Jones. We're speaking with Professor Peter Baofu. In the last segment, Doctor, we were talking about a lot of international issues. But I want to ask you, since you're here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and you mentioned that you traveled extensively to other countries, some countries you traveled to in the Caribbean, some as far as, halfway all the way across around the world. And as you mentioned, you've been to how many countries?
153 right now.
But it is your goal to go to all.
Yeah, there's only about 193 right now in the world. Many of them are very small islands that you probably have never heard of, but it doesn't matter. I want to go to all of them. So I should be able to finish maybe in 1 year or two.
Sure. How does the Bahamas compare to other countries that you
I have an interview about this, about the Caribbean, and Bahamas is one of them. You are lucky to have to be in Bahamas because I think that Bahamas is the extreme of Haiti in the Caribbean. If you look into all those countries in the Caribbean in this region, I think that the Bahamas is one extreme and the Haiti is on the other extreme. It's very clear that if you look into the income per capita, PPP, purchasing power parity, Bahamas is about $46,000 per year. Haiti is like almost nothing. That's extreme contrast. Now the government has been dysfunctional. Now it's governed by gang warfare. In many people, that's why the U.S. and Kenya, by the way, is trying to send some United Nations to send some peacekeeping force in. But this is a major problem for Haiti in the last 200 years. They still have not yet been able to develop well, even though they are among the first to become independent in the global south. The Bahamas, on the other hand, has progressed so far and is one of the wealthiest countries in the region. And so you talk about what do I think about Bahamas is certainly one of the things that I have in mind that in a way there are some geographical advantages that you have that they do not have. But the good news is that you are able to take advantage of those advantages for development. For example, the climate over here is much better than the climate in some other Caribbeans. They are much hotter than over here. Here is hot also, by the way, and most of the time it's not so hot. And plus you are next to the U.S. The U.S. is not far from you, and that's why a lot of Americans come here and visit, even for the weekend. They just come here for the weekend and they go back on Sunday. But can you do that to Africa? So you have some of the advantages, and that's what the Bahamas depends on tourism, which account for 70% or 75% of the total economy. Another 15% or 15 or 20% is on offshore banking, which is related to tourism because they want to attract foreign investment to invest into all these hotels, casinos, houses, and all that for tourism. So the two amours are together, and I think that you have done some good job about that to develop based on that two major sectors of the economy. Therefore, there are some trade-off for that. At least when you compare to what has Haiti done in the last 100 years, or in the last 50 years, look at what the mess that they are in now. So in that sense, I think that what I think the Bahamas is impressive in that sense. I'm not saying it's a paradise, but I'm just saying that it's,
Well, Professor Baofu, you're right in detecting some of them. Yes, the Bahamas is the third richest, or I believe, yeah, the third richest nation in this hemisphere by per capita, only following, of course, the United States and Canada. When you think about it, that is the very antithesis that exists there in Haiti, the exact opposite. You have the poorest nation in the hemisphere. Of course, we could talk about the issues that continue to exist in Haiti, and a lot of regions, especially a lot of countries in this region, as you travel to Trinidad and Tobago and those other places, they are kind of different from us in the sense that they prioritize a lot of agriculture. And in the 1950s, we made that move. The Bahamas had at some point a vibrant citrus industry and pineapple industry and those sorts of things. But we made a decision in the 1950s. So Stafford Sands, who was the Minister of Tourism at that time, to go into this year-round tourism business. And we see that a lot of Caribbean countries, a lot of countries in the region, have tried as well to do that. You know, I interviewed an ambassador here who said that every tourism project, right, every tourism strategy that is employed around the world, if it didn't start here, it's been tried here. But you know, there was an issue that around the 2020 global pandemic, where shortly before that, you know, tourism numbers continued to grow and grow and grow. At the time, I think we had 9 or 10 million visitors a year, which was at the time an impressive feat and a record. This year, I think we're estimated once again to break a record of 12 million visitors, hopefully. But before the COVID-19 pandemic, which crippled the global cruise industry and sort of brought a lot of tourism, almost all tourism globally, to a halt, you know, the Minister of Tourism said that tourism at the time was too big to fail. And we saw it almost overnight because of the pandemic. The reality at the time, what he said was based on the reality at the time, and there was nothing foreseeable that could have stopped the global tourism industry. But we see that given the fact that our realities have changed, especially in the post-pandemic reality that we're in, should this or does this continue to be an issue that not only the Bahamas, but other countries, especially in this region, that rely on tourism, something that they should think about?
That's why I said a while ago that there's some trade-off too. The trade-off is that now we're talking about the bad things, not the good things about the Bahamas. There is a lot of problems about the Bahamas, just as true for any other country on earth. There's some good things, there's some bad things. To be dependent on tourism and offshore banking, but it's good in one way I just mentioned, but it's also bad in another way, because number one, the COVID-19 is a good example. It can show you how vulnerable tourism can be. I remember that during the COVID-19 pandemic, your tourism industry at that time, they shrank rapidly, and it hurt the local people at that time. And now you slowly recover, that's fine. But this is the vulnerability that you have to take into account, and also a lot of economies which depend too much on tourism and offshore banking over time can also encourage corruption. By corruption, I mean just police corruption or criminal corruption and many other things, and over time you also connect the informal economy, underground criminality. And so it's not just in Bahamas, you go to many other countries on earth where the local economy is dependent on tourism, offshore banking, all that. You will see sooner or later all these problems are coming in. Drug trafficking, money laundering, prostitution, criminality, and all that, and corruption, sometimes tight connecting between. Saying that there are some negative sides that you have to look into. It is also the vulnerability. The point that I'm trying to make is that too dependent on tourism and offshore banking is also a vulnerability by itself. It can give you some benefit, but there are some costs associated with it, and you need to be aware of the costs when you need to confront the problems.
corruption exists everywhere.
I'm not saying that corruption only exists in the Bahamas.
Professor. Let me finish the question.
You-
Corruption exists everywhere. Do you think?
Yes, but
that-
some are much more corrupt than some others.
Right, I remember in our conversation previously on corruption, and we were talking about different African nations as well. But in a lot of global corruption, I don't hear talk about a lot of issues that have happened in the United Kingdom or the United States of America that have pointed to not only widespread, but in some cases systematic corruption throughout an entire government. And it seems as always African leaders, or forgive me,
Yeah.
black leaders, are always used as the poster child for corruption.
And that's why a while ago in the previous episode, I said that be careful about Western propaganda in Western mass media. And that's the point that I have not emphasized enough. I said again and again that you have to be very careful because the Bahamas is American backyard. And the American mass media is very influential over here. And that's why I said that either intentionally or unintentionally, consciously or unconsciously, many of the views that I have encountered here, they are very American.
Did you have encountered it?
Yes. Maybe you misunderstand me again. What the point that I'm trying to make is that many of the viewpoints that I have heard from people here, I'm not talking about you personally, I'm just saying that many of them, they are the narratives which you often hear in Western mass media, in Western educational media. The media in this country is not dominated by China, it's dominated by the West. Western mass media are very influential in the Bahamas, and that's why when you talk about anything, either corruption or in international relations or the trap that you told me about major power, rising power, many of these, my point is that you, I don't mean you by the way, I mean you means those people who try to cite that or try to talk about that, you need to be very careful because they put you in a box to look at reality from that perspective. It's not bad necessary, but it's very one-sided. It's one-dimensional, and this it doesn't allow you to understand the reality from a larger perspective. Just as you mentioned about Africa, I agree with that, and that's why I said I was in Africa too. This kind of media, they never talk about, let's say, corruption in the US or the UK or France or Italy. They are always the paradise in the political system, the best political system. And the worst political system, see the dictator, Africa, corruption, that's what you hear again and again and again. My point is, when you get out of this.
My question to you, my question was not that whether it's an Eastern or a Western concept, or why it is that we see it perpetrated in the media, but thank you for the dissertation that you gave on that. But my point is that when I see it and when I look at it, most of the times it's about African nations, and you consider it to be a Western thing, and that may be so. But I mean, in all sorts of media from all sorts of nations. Take for example, you had in the United Kingdom with British Aerospace and the Saudi or wherever they're from, a bribery plot, right? Where you had a sheikh who had a warrant out for his arrest, right? And he walks into number 10 Downing Street, and he tells Tony Blair, right, that unless this investigation is packed up, disassembled, there will be no deal, and British Aerospace will not receive how many other billions of dollars from them for weapons exchanges. But that is something that in Western culture and Eastern culture it's just not talked about. I have not seen.
What do you mean they are not talking?
These different examples of these different issues that we look collectively as being, all we talk about is Zuma in South Africa or some of these different leaders.
So you're saying that the American, don't talk about the American corruption.
You say it's
the African corruption.
You say it's Western, but I say it's racial.
Not really, because there are some racism, but I think that is also a question of I have been in so many countries. I can tell you this. Each country that I go to, they have their own mass media. that all mass media is always portray something to make themselves look good. Now, there are different reasons why they make themselves look good for what groups. For example, for those in power or for those who dominate the country, it can be many different combinations. The point that I'm trying to make is to say, is that racial? No, because you go to the Philippines now, for example. I was there also, I was also on TV too. And you can see that because the Philippines is considered as part of the American backyard, and many of the mass media, they are very pro-Western. And they don't talk too much about this that we are talking about now in question. But they will tell the other side of the story, especially right now, it's always anti-China. You go to, let's say, in other countries, each of them have their own media. So do I think that's racial? No, I think that in many ways that is a conflict of interest. Which interest that you stand for. You are on one side, they are on the other side, and they crash. Each side will say, oh, we're the good guy, they are the bad guys. The other side will say, we are the good guy, they are the bad side, so come and help us and associate with us. So second, in Ukraine, in Gaza, my point again, to make that clear to the audience, is that I don't side with any of them. If one person, I'm not talking about you, by the way, if you come, not about you, if you come in and give me a quotation from let's say, from this side, I will challenge you. I should go to this side and challenge you. It's not because I'm from that side, but on the other hand, if you interview me, you come in and cite this quotation from this side, then my job is to come and challenge you. Then it looks like that I'm defending you now against the point. I'm also not defending you. My point is that I'm playing with you and try to show you that at the end, we need to get out of these boxes. Racial, whatever that you mentioned, I agree with you on that. I see a lot of this in the US, okay? When they talk about Africa, you know, Trump said that African countries are, how do they call it, a shithole country, something like that, okay? Do I accept that? No, anymore that you just asked me, Biden said he is a dictator. Do I accept that? No, all this is propaganda. So we have to get out of it. Now, do I think that it's racial? Is that because Biden is racist? No, I'm just a question of conflicting interest that they fight for their own domination. That is also true in many other countries too. So in a way, I'm not siding with the US, but I'm not also siding with Africa, because I also see a lot of corruption in Africa. But I also agree with you, many of the narratives, they are biased, that's what I'm saying. It's not because I'm on one side or the other side, I try to stay out of that. I can say, yes, in a way that's true, yes, but the other side is also have some.
Professor, you said in an interview, I believe it was Trinidad, that they ought to diversify their economy beyond agriculture and tourism. In the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, you've already outlined that we have two major industries, being tourism and banking. If we were to diversify, and one thing, and a big issue has been in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas over the past 25 years since Mr. Pinley, the first Prime Minister of the country, left office, one of those issues has been sustainable policies that can get us there to creating a manufacturing industry or creating some sort of new industry. What do you think? If you were king for the day, right? Being in the Bahamas, having some exposure so far in terms of the country, the dynamics in, what are the 3 or 4 things you think we need to start by doing to diversify our economy?
Clearly, I shouldn't be the king, and secondly,
no, just a figure.
yeah, no, it's just rhetorical. My solution to the problem is not just economic, because as I said, because I'm a polymath, the economic problem is tied up with the rest of the society and culture. So if I were the king and come and change everything, I would change not just the economic, I also change the social and the cultural factors, because this can help me to achieve what I want in economics. Because if you change the economics without addressing the underlying cultural and social issue, you will not succeed. I tell you now. It's the mistake that a lot of people have been competing because they are not thinking from the standpoint of the polymath. As I said at the beginning of the interview, most people that think like this always from the standpoint of one angle. So if you talk about economic problem, they ask me, okay, fine, what do we do in economics? 1, 2, 3. Professor, tell me. I say, it doesn't work that way. I can tell you, for example, that okay, do some manufacturing or do some banking or do some renewable energy, but it's very misleading. It will not work. It will not work because unless you address the underlying social and cultural problem, all this are nothing, all just an empty talk in the end. So you ask me, Professor, give me 1, 2, or 3 things. Okay, what do we need in economics? Quick, we're at the end. Yes, I can answer that, but it's very misleading for me to answer the question because my approach is so unusual and different. That's why I said at the beginning, I'm a polymath. I don't look at things from one angle. I can spend the whole day talking about economic problems. I have solutions. You probably heard about those interviews that I did before. But within that problem, you need to address the other dimension, culture and society and nature. Unless you address those, you only look into economic, I tell you now. It can sound wonderful, it will not work. No, I can say, okay, increase manufacturing. Okay, you will not get it. Unless you look into it.
One thing in terms of tourism, and tourism has been effective over the past 50 years, certainly based on the conversation, the accolades that you've given us in terms of tourism and our economy. But there's been, as you mentioned, trade-off to that. And a lot has been in terms of the social degradation.
That's exactly why I said.
Because of this North American lifestyle that's been adapted.
That's why I said what I mean is that it's not sustainable.
It's been booming economic.
It have used
but there
time.
has been a human.
Yeah. Sometimes on TV I try to be diplomatic. Sometimes if the person, the audience do not understand me, I have to be much more less diplomatic to make clear. What I mean is that to be less diplomatic, your model is not sustainable. I try to be a nice guy and talk in a very diplomatic way, and there's some
No, but you gotta be honest, Professor.
No, but sometimes you have to be sensitive to the audience because some people, especially in the Caribbean, because I've been here in many of them, and I know that especially in the American backyard, some people get used to one view. This is the American view. If you come in and all of a sudden you overflow that, the first reaction is always negative because you are just demolishing the view that they believe in. You probably watched the one previously in St. Kitts when I challenged some of the notion about the colonization, and some of the audience said that, oh, we are in the American backyard, we cannot do that, we cannot do with the US, we cannot transfer someone. You see that the reaction is always they jump in you right away because they don't even want to, because they get so used to this. That's exactly what I said at the beginning. When you have the chance to go through 150 something countries, and you will see one of the things that you need to do, you need to get out of the box. I keep using get out of that box because that box has been keeping you to think like this for such a long time. And for many people, they don't have a chance to go out and they cannot see how much they have been put in this small box.
Yeah.
It's the same thing over here. And to get out of the box, by the way, in Western philosophy, in Socrates, the Republic, Socrates talked about the analogy of the caveman. The caveman lived in the cave, had never seen light. One day, someone he just went out the cave and see what it's like. He said light, he come back, and he told the other guy, I just saw light. He said, light, what is that? Oh, light is this. And the guy said, I don't believe you. That guy had been living in the cave all his life. It's just an analogy in philosophy, by the way. Of course, it's not true. The point is that it's about the box. When you are in that box for a long time, that is the problem over here. And that's why to answer your question, you need to get out many of that boxes, in this case, the American backyard, because it's not just bad for you, even for Americans like us. Sometimes we get so trapped in this kind of thinking, we cannot see that we are so messed up now in the Middle East. Because we cannot think beyond the notion that Israel is the victim. That is the problem over here. Israel is part of the problem, endangering American national security. But in the US mass media, they don't talk like this. So when you are in that box, you cannot find a solution until you recognize the problem. But for many people, they cannot get out of that box. To be a polymath like me is to show you why I constantly challenge other people, debate with other people, because I want them to see outside the box.
Right.
So the second about international relations.
Great. The last point you raised in terms of Israel, that is controversial, and it may not be true. But it's good to be able to have these kinds of conversations. So we've come to the end of our program today. It's crazy to believe that it's been an hour, but I do appreciate, Professor, the conversation and being able to joust back and forth on these different topics. So to you, good luck in terms of your goal, your initiative in terms of being able to learn something about humanity in terms of visiting all of these other countries. And once again, thank you for participating in our program today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. And to you, our listening and viewing audience, thank you for tuning in to our program, Jones and Company. We'll see you next Sunday night. Thank you.